to do
Aaron
that.
can record. Martha.
Yeah, exactly.
I
know
got
how
it.
it
I
goes.
think I got it.
Okay.
So, folks, today a really special treat. We've got Ben Azadi with us. I connected with Ben. Gosh, it's been a little over 2 years ago.
Yeah.
He first interviewed me for his podcast, and when I met him there, I started looking at his Keto Kamp Academy, and just a couple of weeks after I was interviewed for the podcast, I joined his Keto Kamp Academy, and really the first part of that year was very focused. I had a lot going on and a lot of stress, but was very focused on the methods that Ben teaches and how it transforms your health. And, I'm just really excited to have him here today to talk about his journey and all of the knowledge he has about metabolic health and what he does to teach people and help people understand how our body works and how to optimize ourselves for better health. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Ben.
Yeah, Martha, I love you, and I learn from you all the time. It's been fun seeing how much you've progressed since we did that first interview. And yeah, you came into the academy, and you're not just a member, but you also teach us a lot in the academy, which we're really grateful for. And I love BiotiQuest and Sugar Shift and all the research that you do. So do you want me to start with where do you want me to start exactly?
I think, tell a little bit about your journey that got you into this area, and then, talk about what you teach in your Keto Kamp Academy, and how many times a year you do your kind of open teaching sessions, so that people just get a flavor for what you're doing. And, we can take it from there, and then we'll maybe have a little bit of a Q&A.
Awesome. Sounds good. Good to see everybody on here too. I see Chris, Elizabeth, Mary, see some cameras on here. Yeah, my backstory is that I was very unhealthy growing up here in the United States following a standard American diet. And we all know how toxic and processed a standard American diet is. That's why they call it the SAD diet. It's an appropriate acronym. And I ate really unhealthy growing up, and my metabolism was dysfunctional, like so many people, unfortunately. So I was obese as a kid, physically, but also mentally, dealing with mental health issues and addictions to sugar and drugs and alcohol. So my lifestyle as a kid was very, very unhealthy. And when I was 24 years old, back in 2008, I hit rock bottom where I was 250 pounds, 34% body fat. My whole body felt inflamed, like it was on fire. I was struggling with brain fog, digestive issues, of course, blood sugar roller coaster, pre-diabetic. And the high blood sugar levels are like the first domino to fall that leads to a lot of bad things. And that was my first domino. And I wanted to give up and end my life. And thankfully, I didn't do that because I kept thinking about my mother. So it stopped me from pursuing that. And I took ownership and took responsibility. I started to get into some books like Dr. Wayne Dyer and Bob Proctor and Tony Robbins, and it really helped with the mindset part. And then I just changed my nutrition. I started to eat whole foods. I started to move my body. I started to change my environment. And 9 months later, I lost 80 pounds. I went from 250 pounds all the way down to 170. A lot of body fat dropped off of my body, 34% body fat down to as low as 6 or 7%. And more important than all of that is what it did for my mental health and my mental clarity. And it really helped me with some of those behaviors that I had, the addictions to sugar, et cetera. So that was about 16 years ago, right? I've been studying health and nutrition ever since then. I'm really fascinated with metabolism and how the cellular metabolism works. Every single cell is dependent on metabolism. And the Greek definition, or the Greek term for metabolism, is simply to transform, right? So we have food, sunlight, nutrition, supplements, oxygen, that the metabolism transforms and changes into energy. And when we have a healthy metabolism, we have energy. We feel good. We wake up and we don't need something like coffee or something to stimulate us. We have natural energy, and it flows throughout the whole day. But even on top of that, we eat food and we metabolize it and assimilate it for energy, and our cells produce energy, and we're storing just enough fat for healthy for survival, but not excessive fat where we're becoming overweight and obese. So we're designed, God built us to have a healthy metabolism, and I love to study it just like Martha. My big focus is using these ancient healing strategies like ketosis and fasting and carnivore and different things, modalities that have been around for a very long time, that have stood the test of time. Because essentially, when we remove the interference, the body, the metabolism will go back to work for us. God built the body to have a working, functional, thriving metabolism. It's the interference that's getting in the way. And we could talk about what I believe are the top things that interfere with that. Martha teaches a lot about that as well. So my company is called Keto Kamp, Kamp with the K. As Martha mentioned, I have a podcast called the Keto Kamp Podcast. Martha has been on guest on there. I'm trying to get you down here to Miami for an in-person podcast here, hopefully soon. My group is called the Keto Kamp Academy. We do these challenges 2 or 3 times a year. It's a 5-day keto challenge where it's actually more than just keto, but we take a deep dive into metabolic health. And my specialty is insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes, etc. Those are near and dear to my heart, and we have a high success rate with reversing these conditions. And studies suggest that, crazy, but 93% of United States adults are metabolically unhealthy. And Harvard is predicting by the year 2030 that about 50% of the population in the United States will be obese. So we have an issue. We have a problem. But the cool thing is that with Martha's work and what we're going to talk about today, we have some really good solutions. So I hope that gives you a good overview of what we're doing here.
That's great. So, I know we talk a lot, but we have a lot of people here, Ben, who have come to us through Dr. Bill Davis's program. So the wheat belly, low carb, and there's a lot of debate over keto. And, I know we have these conversations because even though it's called Keto Kamp Academy, your program is called Keto Flex. Your book is called Keto Flex. And, maybe you could talk a little bit about that. And I also just have my own personal curiosity because, and a lot of the people here are very focused on the microbiome, is I know you recently did a month-long, or actually it was more than a month-long carnivore, and you did your microbiome before and after. Yeah. And I'm wondering if there are any kind of tidbits you could tell us from that.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I'll start with the keto thing, and then you're gonna love the gut microbiome is right up your alley, right? You've done a lot of those stool testing in the past, and I love Bill Davis. I had him on the podcast too. He's amazing. What a great guy. Love his energy. He's just got good attitude. Every time I talk to him, it's amazing. Keto, the way that we teach keto is not necessarily as a diet. Keto can be a diet, of course, but ketosis is more of a metabolic state. And there's nothing new about keto. It's just nuanced or maybe new to some people. But really, this metabolic state has been around for as long as humans have existed. And if it wasn't for the ability for this human metabolism to burn fat and produce ketones, we probably wouldn't exist, because our ancestors, they went through famine. They went through times where there was not carbs available and there was only protein and fat, or no food at all. And they would have to burn through their glycogen stores. We have our sugar reserves, and then the glucose drops in the body, insulin drops. So there's a switch that occurs, and that switch is, okay, if we ran out of our backup reserves, which are the sugar reserves, what are we going to do next? What are we going to do to fuel the body? Well, let's tap into body fat and use that body fat, send it to the liver. The liver then produces ketones, and one of those 3 ketones it produces is beta hydroxybutyrate, BHB. And that one is unique because that is the only one of the 3 ketones that has the ability to get into the brain, cross the blood-brain barrier, and then fuel the brain metabolism. So the reason this is important is because when our ancestors needed to stay alert and focused to find their next meal, they relied on ketones. They relied on this metabolic process. Fast forward to now, babies that are being born into this world and naturally breastfed are actually in a state of ketosis. Breast milk has saturated fat, cholesterol. Yes, there is glucose in breast milk, and that baby is very efficient at using the glucose. It naturally goes in and out of ketosis. And I always ask the reason why. And I believe the reason why is because when that baby's brain is developing, it's very, very important. And ketones and fat really help the development of our brains. So what happens for the most part is the baby then gets weaned off of the breast milk, and then it gets this standard American diet, like it happened to me. And then we take a natural fat burning baby and we teach it to burn sugar and only sugar. And then it's eating processed carbs, processed seed oil. It's eating frequently. And now it's an adult and it forgot 30 years it's been burning sugar, and it totally forgot how to burn fat and produce ketones. So when I reference different studies, University of North Carolina shares that 88% of American adults are unhealthy. Another study suggests it's 93%. I believe what they're really saying is that these individuals are in a keto deficiency. They forgot how to burn fat and use ketones. So do we want to stay in ketosis forever? I don't think so. I think it's one energy system, a main energy system, along with glucose. But the key is to kind of go back and forth. And that's where my book, Keto Flex, talks about that. I believe in more metabolic flexibility than dogma and continuous ketosis. Now, does that mean if somebody's doing long-term keto, is it not going to work for them? It may, but for the most part, I've seen shifting in and out, no pun intended with the shift, but shifting in and out of ketosis is where the magic lies. So that's the way we teach keto. I don't know if you want me to clarify anything there before I move on to the carnivore piece, Martha?
No, I think that's pretty good, unless we have somebody who has a specific question about that. Jennifer,
Jennifer.
it looks like Jen. Yep.
Hi,
When I
Ben.
was,
Oh.
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
When I was in school, they told me that babies, the glucose is their money, not ATP. The glucose is what they crave, what they need. Now, for us, it's fatty acids, but the babies need that glucose until I don't know what age, but that's what happens.
They do. They run on that glucose really well, but they also there's also fatty acids, cholesterol, and saturated fat in the breast milk. So it's going in and out of ketosis. It's burning the glucose, going into ketosis, and burning the glucose, going into ketosis, etc. The ketones play a big role. The fatty, as you know, with the neurological development of that baby's brain. So I'm not saying burning sugar is a bad thing. That's not what I'm saying. I am saying only burning sugar, especially as we grow up, it is a bad thing. It leads to some bad problems with our metabolism.
Jen, did you have a question?
Yeah.
I do, if this is the right time. Yeah. So my question involves ketone ester supplements. And I've been playing around with measuring my own ketones. You know, I've been doing blood sugar management for a long time, but the ketone piece of it is newer to me. And I'm seeing how difficult it is to be in ketosis. However, I can take a ketone supplement and be there in 20 minutes. What's the difference? And then a second part of that, and we could talk about it later, is 'cause I'm interested in more like muscle building and ketones role in performance and athletic performance and muscle building.
Yeah, great question, Jennifer. Yeah, so there is a difference between exogenous ketones, which is what you're referring to, and then endogenous ketones, which your body produces. You're not getting so with exogenous ketones, there's a time and place for it. I mean, I have some right here on my desk, right? I use it as a brain hack. There's three types of exogenous ketones. There's ketone salts, ketone esters, and then butanediol. Butanediol is my favorite type, which is like the HVMN ketone IQ one, because it's directly all of the ketone esters or the exogenous ketones are attached to butanediol, so they just use that straight up. Liver uses it, and it raises, to your point, it raises blood ketone levels, but that is not the same thing as your metabolism doing it. So you're not getting the same benefit of working on your metabolism when you're just using exogenous ketones and not letting your body produce the ketones endogenously. We want to do both, I believe. So I like the exogenous ketones in terms of like a supplement, but it's not going to replace the metabolic benefits you get when your liver and your metabolism uses those ketones. So some of the things you can do if you're having trouble producing ketones, stress is a big role, because when your cortisol is elevated, glucose gets elevated, and then ketones drop. So finding a way to master stress and sleep is always like the fundamentals. It might be where you might need to lower your carbs more. Most people could get away with 50 total grams of carbs coming from non-starchy vegetables, and they could get into ketosis. Some people need to be a little bit more aggressive and drop that below 30 or 20 grams total, not net, but total. There's also certain foods you can eat, like sheep and goat dairy, that contain 30% medium chain triglycerides, which helps with ketones as well. There's also fasting. Fasting, if you're doing any fasting, you should see ketones rise and glucose drop as you fast. So that could be something you might want to throw into the mix as well. And then it just might take some time. I could get most people in ketosis in 7 days, and some people it takes 14 to 21 days. So it might just take time. Now, during that, should you take exogenous ketones if you have it? Go for it. I'm not opposed to it, but it's not doing the same thing as your body actually producing those ketones. And out of the three, I don't really like the ketone salts that much, because kidneys have to process it, number one, but they could be acidic. And the esters are also acidic in a way, and they actually raise your ketones too much. But the butanediol raises it, I think, a maximum of 1.5, which is good. It's not too much of a raise, and it's a cleaner source. So butanediol is my favorite version of the exogenous ketones.
So Ben, if you're taking exogenous ketones, like in the beginning when you're trying to train yourself to be fat adapted, does that kind of slow down your process of your body adapting because you're taking an external source?
No, not at all. It's not going to hurt. Now, the only thing that might be a challenge is that when you're testing your blood ketones and you're taking exogenous ketones, it's not reflecting what your body's producing, right? So you might want to go a day without taking the ketones and then see what your body's doing. But no, it's not going to slow it down or anything. It could help, especially as you make that transition from burning sugar to burning fat. I'm all for it. And then for performance, I think you said, Jennifer, that's a big thing for you. Taking ketones around exercise and performance is a good idea. I play basketball, usually Sundays, fasted here in Miami at a park where it's hot and it's outdoors. And I noticed that if I'm doing something like carnivore, where my carbs are 0, and I try to play 2 hours of fasting, I could bonk. But if I take exogenous ketones, I don't. So I would take it before or even during exercise. It could help with performance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I had another question. Sorry. I'll think of it later. Okay.
You need more ketones.
Yeah.
Oh,
No
that's
worries.
what it was.
Yeah.
Nutritional ketosis. So I'm looking at my Keto Mojo to measure my ketones. And blood sugar is managed, and my I work with Dr. Davis too, along with BiotiQuest. And so the blood sugar piece of this is perfect, but the ketone, and then the Keto Mojo kind of shames me. It's like, you're not in nutritional ketosis, although I'm watching my number sometimes increase in micro amounts. But what is nutritional ketosis versus just I've got a value.
What are the readings you're getting on the Keto Mojo? Do you remember?
Like 0.5. And that's a good day. Usually it's like 0.3. And then if I follow like Mindy Peltz's Fast Like a Woman measurement protocols, it never does what she says it's supposed to do. It actually goes down, not up. So I'm having a hard time making sense of it. So I don't need to make this about me, but I just wanted to know what nutritional ketosis means, if that's different than something else.
Well, when you're at 0.5, you're in ketosis. You're officially in ketosis, and you're burning fat instead of sugar, and that is the goal initially, to get to 0.5 or higher, which is looking at millimolars per liter, which is the Keto Mojo. There is a sweet spot that I like to feel really good, and that's somewhere between 0.8 and 3.0. 0.8 and 3.0 millimoles per liter on that Keto Mojo is a good sweet spot. I don't necessarily believe higher is better with ketones, just like higher glucose is not better. And as a matter of fact, the more metabolically flexible and keto adapted you get, you might actually see lower ketones, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. It just means your mitochondria are using them really efficiently. But in the beginning, it shouldn't be that way. You should actually see it increase. So I'm curious, Jennifer, do you do any fasting at all?
Intermittent, yeah.
How many hours daily on average?
13 is about my, like, an easy pattern.
Okay.
13 hours fasted. I can do more, but then I miss out on the latte that I like to have. And so.
Understood. Yeah, I love my lattes too. So are you testing your glucose and ketones during the fast, like throughout it, before you break it?
So recently I started doing this the fast like a girl, which is measure it first thing in the morning. And so then that brings the conversation of the dawn effect.
Mm-hmm.
So that very first reading is a higher blood sugar than I like to see. About an hour or so later, it drops kind of a lot. And it kind of stays there. And then, the foods that I eat, especially in the morning, don't really move that number very at all. So usually it's like a latte, a Paleo Valley meat stick. Honestly, that's like my breakfast most of the time.
When you test your glucose first thing in the morning, you're also testing your ketones?
Yes. And so Mindy says you probably know all this, that you'll get a ketone reading and then later that number will go up. For me, it goes down. The ketone goes down. The blood sugar goes down, but so does the ketone number.
Got it. How long have you been doing this for?
Oh gosh, when did I start? Like in January? Not long. Not too long.
So like a month or so, and you're still seeing that trend.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm going to interject for a moment here because Jen has been coaching with Dr. Davis and working on a low carb lifestyle for a long time. So what I would say is she's probably very efficient in her use of fuel.
Yeah.
Even
yeah.
not having been somebody who was checking ketones. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you've been
Yeah.
doing it for a while, it means your mitochondria are really efficient at using the ketones, and it won't really show on the blood, even though you might very well be in a good range. What you can try is the goat and sheep dairy during your eating window, and then bringing your I don't know how late you eat, but bringing your last meal of the day earlier on and having more time fasting before bed, you'll see lower blood sugar levels in the morning, and you should see higher ketones as well. So maybe bringing your dinner earlier, like a couple hours, giving a little bit more fasting time before bed should help too.
Okay, so that last meal, what I usually do is whenever that last meal is, then I wait 13 hours, so its relationship to bedtime changes, but the fasting amount I try to keep consistent.
That's fine. Yeah, you could still keep that consistent if you could just bring it earlier in the day, the last meal.
When you say goat and sheep, is just A2 dairy acceptable, or is it specifically goat? Could it be A2 cow's milk?
No,
Or-
not in regards
no.
because goat and sheep dairy 30% is MCT, and that helps with ketones. Not the same thing for even healthy cow dairy. Yeah, it's different.
All right, thanks.
You're welcome.
I think Kathy Sicard has a question.
Hi, Ben.
Hi,
So
Kathy.
Jen, I wanted to mention first that I did notice exactly what Martha said. So I've been doing Wheat Belly now with a focus on gut health for 3 years. And I had, I forgot which ketone device I used. I can't remember what it's called. It's not the Mojo, it's another one. Anyway, When I first started Wheat Belly, I really noticed my ketone levels. Like, it was so easy to get a high level without even trying. I was just following Wheat Belly. And now I don't notice that as much. My numbers are much lower. I still get in and out of ketosis. My goal is not to stay in ketosis, but I do like to be in there occasionally. So I have noticed that it was very dramatic compared to what it was 3 years ago as far as the difference. I used to get really high, and I would get concerned, like, oh, I don't want to be that high. I didn't eat more carbs. Our goal in Wheat Belly, Ben, just so you know, is we try to aim for no more than 15 grams of net carbs per meal. And I believe most of us in the community probably eat 2 meals a day, maybe something in the morning, but usually lunch and dinner. So that's kind of where we are as far as carbs. So
Got
to
it.
my
Yeah,
question,
that's keto.
yeah. So to my question though, so I've been doing Wheat Belly for 3 years with a big focus on gut health. I make the homemade yogurts and kombucha and sauerkraut and all the fermented stuff. And we eat no wheat, grain, corn, sugar, seed oils. I avoid all that. I read every label like a crazy person. So my concern, though, has been a couple of things. One is the cholesterol panel, specifically the NMR. So in Dr. Davis's community, we ignore the LDL. We ignore the overall cholesterol level. What we look at is your HDL. Mine has been as high as 93. My triglycerides have been as low as 52. And the other big focus is to keep our small LDL particle count below 200. And I got there immediately when I started Wheat Belly. It was without even trying. Again, not trying. What I mean is following the Wheat Belly protocols. I couldn't believe it. It was below 200. It was when I first started. It was, I believe, around 900, 800, something like that. Wow. And then I start going back and forth sometimes. And I'm very strict. I don't cheat. I never cheat. In 3 years, I ate a quarter of a date the other day that my daughter insisted that I try. But I don't eat dates because they're so high in sugar. And I do eat some fruit, blueberries, blackberries, raspberries. That's pretty much it. So I get very, very little sugar, and my small particle count will still go over 200. Sometimes I'll be at 500. Sometimes it's going up to 600, and it stresses me out. I'm like, why is this? It's sugar is the main culprit for that, according to Dr. Davis, but it can also be gut health. It can also be thyroid. I do have Hashimoto's. So I'm just curious of your thoughts on that, what you've seen in your community with lipid values. It's common, I know, in the low carb community. Dave Feldman's group, they talk about it a lot, and I'm just curious what you've seen and your thoughts.
Yeah, it's a great question. There's a lot of moving parts, as you know, to lipids and heart disease. There's only one cause of heart disease, only one, and that is damage to the blood vessels. Right now, what causes damage to the blood vessels? There's multiple reasons for that, but only one cause of heart disease, and that is damage to the blood vessels. So yes, looking at the NMR and the small particles is a good gauge to see if there's damage occurring. 200 is great. I'm really, even if 400 or so is not a major concern to me, as long as the inflammatory markers are optimal, right? So if we look at the NMR, you said your triglycerides were really good, HDL was high, so that triglyceride to HDL ratio is rock solid based off of what you shared. But also looking at like a fasting insulin is very important. I consider a fasting insulin an inflammatory marker, so we want to see that in single digits. So even if the small particles are a little high, but that fasting insulin is like a 3 or 4, that's a good sign. But then looking at things like homocysteine and high sensitivity C-reactive protein, so looking at all of that as a full picture, and if your inflammatory markers look good, your insulin is sensitive, you got good A1C, 5.2 or less, and your small particles like 500 to 600, if that was me, I would not be concerned personally. And if I was concerned, then I would just go get a calcium score done and just see if there's any, calcium built up. It's $100, pay out of pocket, and that'll.
Well, and that is what actually brought me here when I started the program, was because I had a high calcium score. It was, I can't remember my numbers. I should have them memorized, but I want to say, I'll just throw out a number. Maybe I was at 700, and I reduced it down to 400 after a year of being on Wheat Belly.
That's awesome. That's really
And
good.
I was very excited, and I pretty much kept it stable. I didn't do one this year. Last year, I had like a 5% bump on a couple of the numbers. Dr. Davis says that could just be the margin of error. But for all intents and purposes, I've pretty much stabilized it. And as far as the inflammatory markers, my homocysteine is 4.9. My fasting glucose is like 83. I wear a CGM more as a biohack, not because I'm pre-diabetic or anything. My insulin, I believe, was 3 when I just had that done. I've done C-peptide, I've done the IL-6, and I've done so many inflammatory markers for that reason, because I want to be able to see those things are all in the optimal range, and they are. So I celebrate those things, but I still tend to stress about the small particle count. And then, every now and then something kooky will go with my thyroid. I'm still chasing that, trying to get my, another common phenomenon in the low carb community is getting your free T3 from being rock bottom, despite, up in the T4 and increasing the T3. My T3 remains low, and that seems to also be a common thing in the low carb community. But but my other markers look good, so I try to focus on that and just keep doing what I'm doing.
Those markers are outstanding. Sorry, Martha. Yeah, you're doing a lot of things, Kathy.
Well, I was gonna because I know you live across the river from cane fields that are sprayed with glyphosate. I actually learned from someone this morning a connection to the thyroid and the conversion there of, if there's a toxin load that does not allow for that conversion. And so one of the things I would say, take your temperature like every day, 3 spots across your head for the next week, and let me know what that is. And I may have an idea for you, but it requires tyrosine, phenylalanine, iodine, copper, and selenium to convert that T3. And if you're tied up with toxins, which depending on when some of that stuff happens, it could tie to when they're working in the cane fields over there.
Okay. Well, that's really good to know. And I did find one other thing about the conversion this week that I learned is the DIO1 and DIO2. I won't even try to pronounce the word, but it's the enzyme that's responsible for converting the T4 to the T3. I apparently have the genetic marker, the high risk AA, which is the worst combination, which means you could have a predisposition. Of course, genes don't control everything, but you could have a predisposition of not being able to convert the T4 to the T3. So I've been speaking to my doctor about that, and maybe I need to be on just T3 or more T3 and less T4. And I noticed a lot of this shift when my doctor increased my armor, which gave me more T4. My thyroid antibodies went up, my reverse T3 went up, which you don't want. That's a sign that you're not converting. And I was like, wait a minute, this is something maybe, but the glyphosate is probably, I am taking the ideal immunity right now, along with the sugar shift. But when my numbers were really high last year, it was in December, right after they sprayed. And that's when I just had my lab work done. So I'm wondering if that is something. So I will definitely, tell me about the temperature again. Do it 3 times a day.
Take your temperature 3 times a day and see, if your temperature is running below what a normal temperature would be.
Okay. And then I'll just follow up with you an email.
Yeah.
Any particular time? I'm sure upon waiting.
Well, just like, morning, midday, and evening or afternoon or something.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Ben.
Yeah, you got it, Kathy. You're on top of it. I'm impressed.
Okay. And we have Profil, or do you want to ask your question now, and then we'll go to the keto? We'll have him talk about carnivore, and then we'll go to the rest of the questions.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. First thing, I'm kind of new to this keto thing. So can you define what is keto and ketosis, and how does it help your body?
Yeah. Ketones are a byproduct of your your metabolism burning your body fat. So we have body fat as stored energy, and when we lower our carbohydrates, we lower our glucose and insulin levels, and then we turn on this switch to now burn our body fat for energy, and that's where the liver produces ketones. There's a lot of benefits to ketones, lowering of inflammation, upregulating different antioxidant capacities like glutathione and even melatonin. Ketones are simply a byproduct of fat metabolism. You're burning your body fat, and most people here, at least in the United States, don't have that ability. They're only burning sugar and glucose, and they've forgotten how to burn fat. So it's just it's an energy system, and when you're metabolically flexible and healthy, you could burn sugar and carbs when you need to, and then when you lower your carbs and you lower your glucose, then you switch to burning fat and producing ketones. So there's nothing really new about it. It's just kind of nuanced, as I was saying, or new to some people, but it's really just a byproduct of fat burning. That's what ketones are.
Okay, so how does it really help the body?
Many ways. I mentioned it lowers inflammation. It raises glutathione, which is an antioxidant. Ketones also have a special signaling capacity where it communicates with your mitochondria. And, the mitochondria are very important. I think every health expert will agree that that's the name of the game. Martha talks about the mitochondria all the time. We want healthy mitochondria. So ketones actually signal to the mitochondria to create mitochondrial biogenesis, which is the creation of new mitochondria. And it does this because it kind of stresses the mitochondria, and stress is not necessarily bad if it's short term, right? So when we are in ketosis, the body, the metabolism, and the innate intelligence thinks that we are going through tough times. There's not a lot of carbohydrates. There's not a lot of food available. Maybe we're in a famine. So you get mitochondria that get stronger. And then there's also this mitophagy process where your mitochondria that are weak, that are not producing good energy, your body starts to fix it or get rid of it. So there's amazing mitochondrial benefits when you're in ketosis. And when we look at how your mitochondria produce energy, there's a huge increase in energy production, ATP production, when somebody's in ketosis versus when somebody's burning sugar. And I could go on and on about the benefits. Of course, you could lose weight because as you produce more energy, it raises your basal metabolic rate. And as you lower insulin, you tap into more body fat. So of course, the weight loss is a side effect. There's also studies that show it helps to reverse type 2 diabetes and insulin resistance, and helps with PCOS. And there's also the epileptic seizures. And you have Dr. Chris Palmer using it for bipolar schizophrenia. So there's a lot of amazing benefits to keto.
There's, I'm always liking to tell people books they can read. There's a great book called Ketones, the Fourth Fuel.
Yeah.
That kind of tells the history of the research. And that sort of goes from Warburg chemistry up through the Krebs cycle, and these researchers who discovered kind of the pieces of the metabolic puzzle, if you want to get into a little bit of the nerdy science. But it also talks about ketones and Alzheimer's, and there's a connection in both Alzheimer's and Parkinson's to what they call insulin resistance of the brain, or type 3 diabetes. And ketones can actually be very beneficial for the brain in that situation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
You want to tell us a little bit about carnivore, and then we'll get Mary's question?
Yes. Yeah. So it's what Martha was saying earlier. I just did 90 days of carnivore. And I usually do carnivore 30 days, 40 days, a couple of times per year. This time I went 90, which was my personal longest. But on day one, I did a whole bunch of lab values, blood work, full thyroid panel, antibodies, hormone panel, of course, the lipids, the NMR, and all the inflammatory markers. So I did a whole bunch of lab work day one. I put on a continuous glucose monitor day one. Like Kathy was talking about, she wears one. And then I did a stool test with a company called Tend Health. And the stool test, of course, was looking at the bacteria in my gut and also the diversity. And the stool test part was the interesting part, because when I did the test day one, and by the way, so let me just clarify. The goal was to do all those tests day one, and then do 90 straight days of carnivore, just nothing but animal meat, protein and fat, no carbs, no fiber, nothing. and then do all the testing again on day 90, which I did. So day 1, when I did the stool test and I got back the results, it showed that my diversity was okay. It wasn't great. It wasn't in a dangerous zone. It was okay, nothing special. And their recommendation on the test was to increase, well, first of all, their recommendation was to stay away from too much red meat, stay away from a keto diet, eat more fiber, polyphenols, prebiotics, so more plants essentially. And what did I do? The complete opposite of what they suggested, right? I said, okay, well, too bad because I'm doing carnivore. And anyway, so I did the complete opposite and ate nothing but meat and stayed in ketosis for 90 days. And then I retested on day 90. And most people, not this group probably, and definitely not Martha, most people would think that, oh my gosh, you didn't listen to their recommendations. You didn't have fiber. You didn't have prebiotics. Your diversity is going to get worse. Your score was going to get worse. But that was not the case. My diversity actually improved. 7 keystone bacteria were on day 90 that were not there on day 1. And the ratios improved too, like Firmicutes to Bacteroides and all the stuff that Martha talks about. But anyways, the overall thing is that the test looks so much better day 90, just eating protein and fat. And even the chief scientific officer from the company who reviewed it with me on a Zoom call said it was a surprise to him, and it kind of changed his paradigm to gut health. I know it's not a surprise to Martha that it happened, but that was the most interesting thing that I saw. And I'm putting together a whole video that's in a podcast that's going to show all the results for you. But anyways, Martha, I'm sure you have some more things to share on that, but it was super interesting.
Well, I think it's exciting to hear that. I think part of what goes on is there's bacteria sort of in there waiting for their niche to be available, and there are, carbohydrates kind of feed the pathogenic bacteria. We know that a lot because that's what we're looking at in Sugar Shift, is removing those simple carbohydrates like glucose and fructose to improve the gut bacteria. But I actually went through an opposite exercise at the beginning of when I started the BioCollective, because everybody's like fiber, fiber, fiber. And so I made this fiber shake of 7 different kinds of fiber every day for about 7 months. And I was measuring my microbiome. And what happened was one species of bacteria called Eubacterium cereum went from, it was already high in my gut. It was like 7%. And at the end of that 7 months, it was 37%. And I said, this cannot be good.
Wow.
So, that paradigm of fiber versus carnivore, I think we have to really think about how humans lived before we hit this modern world. And yeah, maybe in the summertime when there's lots of things growing, we're eating a lot of plant fibers and that kind of stuff. But the rest of the year, we were hunting and eating meat. So
You're right.
It's pretty fascinating. So let's get to Mary's question. I know you have a hard stop, don't you?
Yeah, I got like about 5 minutes. I got to hop off. Yeah.
Okay, so let's see if we can get Mary's question, and then if we have any time, we'll wrap it up, and you can tell people how to find you.
Sounds good.
Mary?
Hi, Mary. I think you're muted.
You're muted. Can you unmute yourself? It's in the bottom left, across the bottom bar. There's a little microphone.
Can
No,
you do it for her? Maybe no.
no.
If you want to
Well,
type
it says
in,
she's not muted, but whatever you're connected to is not giving us your sound, Mary.
if
I don't
you
know
want
if
to
you-
type, you could type it in, Mary.
You type your question.
Yeah.
There is one typed in here that says, I'm the only type 1 diabetic on here. I'm fascinated by this, but I've never studied the difference between ketosis and ketoacidosis.
Yeah. So ketoacidosis is a concern for type 1 diabetics. That is true. That's where your ketones would be about 15 millimoles per liter or higher. outside of type 1 diabetes is pretty rare, but with type 1 diabetes, ketosis can be beneficial for a type 1 diabetic, but you do want to work with somebody and you want to monitor your glucose and ketone numbers pretty religiously to make sure you're not seeing that high rise in ketones. What it will do for you, it'll just help you rely on less insulin. So it'll help your quality of life. It'll help take some time off of your hands for type 1 diabetics. I have worked with a few in the past, and it just helps you rely on less insulin. But you do want to monitor your blood glucose and your blood ketones, because to your point, ketoacidosis is very dangerous, and for type 1 diabetics, it can happen. But if you're looking at your glucose and ketones and you're seeing some things that are trending in the wrong direction, you could of course eat some food that's not keto, and it'll correct that. But if I would recommend working with somebody, Charles. It's very important to work with somebody on that.
And it looks like Mary's still muted. Claudia, you had a question, and this will be our last question. Mary, if you want to email me the question, I can get Ben to send us an answer offline.
Yeah.
Yes, I have a question. You've been talking before about cycling ketosis, and someone told something about that a long time ketosis can be difficult to maintain. And that's what I experienced. I took the keto diet for epilepsy since about 5 years. And it's about 1 year that I really have difficulty to stay in ketosis. So now I'm cycling. Sometimes I'm in ketosis, really deep in ketosis, and sometimes I'm not. And so my question is cycling better for that, or is what do you recommend, or why is it that after such a long time, it's more difficult to stay in a deep ketosis or to stay in a ketosis? Is the body working different, or what is it?
Are you epileptic? Is that what you said?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's an exception to me saying to get out. With epilepsy, you do want to stay in there probably longer and work with somebody to see if you can get out and see what happens. But so you're an exception to what I teach to most people. So I'll just share this. Like, for most people who don't have a certain condition, then it is beneficial to get out, to flex out, what I call keto flexing, for many reasons. I mean, I mentioned that when you're in ketosis, your body thinks you're going through a stressful state. Short term, that's great. You're in this what's called this hormetic zone, and you're getting benefits. But long term, now all the benefits start to go away, and your body will raise cortisol. Your body could break down protein. Your body could, chronically low levels of insulin are not good as well, just like chronically high levels. So you do want to, work that pancreas a little bit. So in general, in my academy, I have what's called a 45-day keto reset, where somebody's burning sugar. We get them into ketosis. We get them fat adapted, then keto adapted. And then on day 45, we determine, are they ready to flex out? If somebody's healthy and they have a healthy metabolism, then we flex out and we customize it to them. If somebody is still, let's say, insulin resistant or type 2 diabetic, we keep them in ketosis a little bit longer. With epilepsy, obviously, it's a different situation. And I would recommend, of course, if you're not already doing it, working with a practitioner who understands how to use keto for epilepsy. That's not my expertise, so I can't tell you how to do it for you. And I wouldn't either, because it would be unethical to do that. But I do believe for most people, it is important to flex in and out. You are an exception to that, of course. And there are some really amazing doctors, functional doctors, that understand epilepsy and how to use keto, and maybe even potentially get yourself out to do it the right way. That's not me. I've just never worked with somebody on that. So I'm sorry I can't give you like a specific answer there, Claudia, but I hope that helped a little bit.
Yes.
I wonder if exogenous ketones would help that.
What really does help is the MCT oil, and what I discovered
MCT
last
oil.
year is I tried the sugar shift, because I thought that you recommend that for ketosis, and I took it about 2 months, and in the end of these 2 months, I really got into deep ketosis. So I live in
cool.
Europe, so it doesn't ship to Spain, and I will receive soon the sugar shift again. And after stopping the sugar shift, it's now about 4 weeks. I really have trouble to get into ketosis, to get back into ketosis without the MCT oil, for example. And that's, I asked myself, what's the reason that a body that adapted after 3 or 4 years that you don't get that deep in ketosis, or you don't need to get that deep in ketosis, or whatever. About the epilepsy, I don't note anything bad not being in ketosis. That's not the point. But my question is more: is the body getting that adapted that you don't get into ketosis no more after 4 or 5 years? Is that the point, or what is it? So I
Yes,
don't know
well,
if you have experience about that.
Yeah, it's more keto. You're keto adapted now, so there's a difference. So fat adaptation is simply you're registering 0.5 or higher in Keto Mojo. You're there for a few days. You're burning fat instead of sugar. You could do that fairly quickly. Keto adaptation is a little bit longer. It's more defined as the reshaping of physiological systems, and essentially it just means your mitochondria are really good at using those ketones. And when that happens, to your point, you were probably seeing 2.8 or 3.0 or 1.8 on your ketones. But then when you get keto adapted and now those mitochondria are sucking up the ketones, the blood levels decrease, but it's not a bad thing. It just means your mitochondria are using them really well. So you will see that. People who have been doing long-term ketosis or long-term low carb, even if they're flexing in and out like myself, you're going to see lower ketones because your cells are using them. And that is not a bad thing. That's actually a really good thing. You're not going to see the high numbers unless you do something like a longer fast. So it's actually a good thing in my book.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, I know we have to be respectful of Ben's time. He has one of the busiest calendars of pretty much anybody I've seen. So one, I want to just thank you for joining us today. And if you want to learn more about Ben's deep knowledge in this area, I mean, he has hundreds of podcast episodes. Look up his podcast and listen to I could just listen to it for days on end because he has so many great experts, and his knowledge and the questions that he asks are just fantastic. So you'll learn a lot from that. And then, keep your eyes peeled for when he runs another one of his challenges, and you can kind of step into that and see how his process works. Because, I think he's helping lots of people, and I'm very grateful to call him a friend and to learn from him as well. And there's his website. Bridget just popped that up.
Yeah, thank you, Martha. I love you. I learn from you all the time. Martha, I love Sugar Shift. I love all your products. You know that I recommend it to my students all the time. You guys are in a great group here. Great questions. I mean, I could tell this is like the questions here were high level, and I can tell y'all are super smart. You're getting educated the right way. These were not the regular questions that I get, so I could appreciate that. And the podcast is called the Keto Kamp Podcast, the Camp with the K. It's actually getting a new name, Martha. I'm actually going to change the name of the podcast soon. But anyways, that's beside the point. Keto Kamp Podcast. You might want to start with Martha's episode, and then the website's Ben Azadi. And I hope to see some of you maybe at a conference soon, or just I hope this was valuable. But I love the group and I love being a part of this. So thank you, Martha.
Well, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Everybody who's
Thank you.
here, we also are doing a shortened session tonight to do a Q&A just on our normal schedule. We'll talk a little bit about the coaching as well and what's involved with that. If anyone's interested, and just get the typical Q&A answers done. So we will see you again tonight at 6:30 if you come and have more questions. And Mary, if you want to email me your question, I still can't hear you. So if you want to email me, I'll have Ben answer your question for you. Great. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you later.
Thank you.